I always tell people it wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't I stepped on the ice and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was actually kind of the opposite. I've achieved more than I ever thought I would, had the most incredible moments at the Olympics, had the best Olympic experience that I couldn't write better than myself, I feel, because I did have all that closure. I feel it's been relatively easy to walk away from, I guess, that chapter in my life.
Welcome back to Dive Beyond Sport, the podcast where performance meets humanity. Today, we are joined by Team GB figure skater Luke Digby. Luke, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to share my story. Probably a sport that doesn't really get the headlines too much, but yeah, it's quite interesting once we dive into it.
Absolutely. I mean, based on what I watched from the Milan games, it looks like a super interesting sport, and I don't know an awful lot about it either. And that's the whole point of what this podcast is all about, is trying to touch those other sports that don't get that much kind of media exposure, and trying to educate people about them. So that's exactly what we hope from this episode. But Luke, I wanted to kind of open with a quote from your retirement post that you recently shared, and a lot of it resonated really well with me, and I'm interested to hear your perspective about it compared to my own. So the quote was, "My Olympic experience was everything and more, worth every second of all the effort and heartache it took to get there. I always dreamed of getting to the Olympics, and never anything more. It was the light at the end of the tunnel, the top of the mountain, the pinnacle for me. It kept me going through the extremely difficult times, always a fire burning inside of me to achieve that." On to the next slide, you said, "It's not easy letting go of something you have dedicated 18 years of your life to. The fire inside of me that kept me going all these years on competitive ice has gone. It's difficult to explain, and not necessarily a sad moment, but rather a contented and happy moment to live with, the happy memories, and know I'll be an Olympian for life." Can you put your finger and share with us the moment where the fire went out?
Yeah, you know what, it was, I guess the one moment I could probably give you was I was sat there at the closing ceremony in Verona, and the Olympic torch was back in Milan, but you could see it on the screens, and it was quite slow, sad, emotional music, and you just see the torch just sort of just close down and the flame goes out. And I sort of looked at that, not necessarily super sad, but I kind of resonated with that. Like, it did feel like it was the end of the journey. So I'd say that's probably the main point that I guess resonated with me at that moment.
Wow. I mean, first of all, I want to say as well, like the post that Yona was quoting from, it was a really, really beautiful post. I thought it was really, really nicely written. And I think we were talking about it just before, when we both read that post. I think we were both really excited to interview you, because partly for like the perspective, but also we're like, oh, it just seems like, you know, such a top guy as well. Like, wow, it's so cool.
Yeah,
that was
definitely.
But we were just saying as well, though, how you competed in your first Olympics. You became an Olympian, this long goal, and like you said, suddenly you knew in that moment, as like the flame disappeared, that also your own flame. I mean, that imagery is incredible. Your own flame kind of extinguished, but then you couldn't stop right there. You still had the World Championships in Prague. Not much time later.
Yeah.
That must have been so difficult.
It was difficult, because I think, like I said, it's been an 18-year journey to the Olympics, literally to the top of the mountain, and in that moment, I felt truly satisfied and truly happy with that, but that wasn't necessarily the end point of the season, or the end point, I guess, of my career. We'd sort of decided that we would continue and finish the season at the World Championships a few weeks later. But But I guess I found it's difficult to explain, but I just found it really difficult coming from that Olympic bubble we were there 3.5 weeks, to almost snapping back into reality and then finding that motivation to go again straight away was difficult. And yeah, it was a few bumpy weeks, and then additional injuries and things like that, that just made the challenge even harder. But almost in the end, finding motivation in a different way, and for different reasons, almost having and really wanting those last moments on competitive ice.
Did the whole thing kind of catch you by surprise? Because, I mean, I genuinely had no idea when you were going to say that fire went out, and the fact that it aligned with the Olympic flame going out is like a very emotional thing, and that must have been really intense in that moment. But I presume that with that, you went into the games not necessarily thinking that was going to be, one of your last competitions. Maybe hopeful for many things, then bang, you're hit by that intense moment. And it's very internal as well. It's very private. It's very, like a very unique thing, I think, to feel. Did it take you by surprise, or had it been something that was bubbling up for a while?
I think it's something that's been bubbling up for a while. I think it goes probably right to my younger days when it was just about getting to the Olympics. It was never multiple games or necessarily winning medals. For me, the goal was just to get to the Olympic Games. And I guess that is what satisfied me enough. I know for other athletes, they would probably strive for more, but that was always what it was for me. So I guess in one way, I'd probably never looked further than that, because I knew that would always make me happy and truly satisfy me, just making it to the Olympic Games. And I think also just the experience I had during the games just further consolidated that, yeah, this is everything I wanted, and I've had that.
Yeah, I mean, I this was something I wanted to ask, where I found it interesting again with some of the things that I'd read about you, was that you'd had this dream of going to the Olympics as a kid, but you also you'd had this dream from a young age, but you also didn't necessarily fully believe that you would be good enough. Is that have I got that kind of right?
Yeah,
or?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm sure like every sport, the journey is so long, it's so difficult, and when I was younger, I just enjoyed my skating. I enjoyed the journey. I always felt like, I guess I had the potential, but I think it's one thing having the potential and actually really finishing off that journey, because there's so many hurdles along the way that can stop you at that point. And especially through, I guess, sort of my years, sort of when I was 17, 18, struggled with a couple of really major knee injuries. I almost got to the point where it didn't feel like the dream was slipping away. It just felt like it might not be possible. So I guess, but then almost a change in disciplines from a solo skater to a pair skater, skating with a partner, sort of reignited that dream. But to go as far as we did in a relatively short time, skating together, to achieve that was a big achievement, and was one that was difficult along the way. So I guess there's always, I guess, those doubts along the way, and yeah, difficult moments where, when it came to qualifying a quota spot for Great Britain, we've really only got one main chance, and you've got to perform in that moment. You could do all the right things before, but if you don't perform in that specific moment, then that's it, really. It's as black and white as that.
That sounds an awful lot like diving.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that feeling very, very well on 3 different occasions, and the anxiety and the stress and everything building into that moment, and sometimes even the anxiety afterwards as well. Once you've already done it, but you forget that you've already been through it. It's super intense. I want to like now try and like, build a bit of context around your story, your journey. We'll dive a bit more into some of the things that you've mentioned so far. Um, but as I say, so far there's so much that resonates with me because I had that dream to be an Olympian from the age of 9, and it became obsessive, and it was something that I really, really, really wanted. Slightly differently to you, once I kind of ticked it off, I wanted more and I wanted to push more, and I didn't necessarily expect that beforehand. I thought I might be a little bit more towards what you did, like yes, I've ticked that box, now I can move on with my life, but it wasn't quite the same. But that shows everyone's got their own different journeys. I remember when I was a kid, I used to go skating at Doncaster Dome. I'd go there for birthday parties. I used to really enjoy it. I found it super fun. Like I loved going fast. I was quite good at it.
Yeah.
Found it a lot of fun. But obviously, it wasn't the sport for me. I don't think I was already dialing at the time. But from when you first went skating, why did it become the sport for you? What was it about skating that you really connected with?
I think, like I said, especially with the build up to the Olympics, you do a lot of media and you share your story. And I think it's given me plenty of time to, I guess, really reflect over those early days. And I think looking back to it, I always tell people it wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't, I stepped on the ice and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was actually kind of the opposite. Both my sisters skated. Mainly one of my sisters, she was the one that really, really wanted to skate. So my mom took us all down to learn how to skate. And I didn't want to do the lessons, getting on the ice when I was about 6 years old. I just wanted to go on public with my mates, go round and round, super fast. So in reality, like I said, not being love at first sight, but as I did get older, I did start the lessons and start to progress through the levels. And then it got to a point where I realized that I started to enjoy it. I loved jumping on the ice. And that was really, I guess, where the love started to develop. So it was more, not straight away, but it developed quite early on. When I got to about 8 or 9 years old, I really, truly fell in love with the sport.
How did your sisters get on with it? How did they establish their own careers, or how did it work out for them?
They loved it. They both loved it. They both got to a very good standard. But they moved on to other things. They moved on to university and I guess pursued other avenues of life relatively early on.
I always find it super interesting when you know siblings start a sport at the same time or whatever, and it always seems to be the younger sibling that doesn't really want to do it in the first place but just goes along because their older siblings are doing it. That turns out to be the one that is actually really good at it and goes on to be successful. Like, I mean, I don't there's no answer for that. I don't know what it was like from maybe your perspective, but I feel like it's a story I've seen on numerous occasions.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not sure. I guess probably more by chance, because I think they'd both tell you, my mom would tell you that I really wasn't interested at the beginning, but I guess that switch must have flipped quite early on. Like I said, when I progressed through the levels, and at about 9 years old, that's when I guess I really, really started to love it, and that's when I guess my Olympic dream really started from that point.
And then, since we're talking about family, just quickly, because obviously, I'm mates with your brother Paul, and he's a professional footballer, and your sisters both did. You all did skating. That to me is super interesting. So, like, what just on that part, like, was this influence, do you think, from your parents, or like where did that like drive for sport come from?
From my mom. Everything like that, I guess we've all done is through our mom. But really, my mom just had a love for sport for us. Everything was sport related. She'd take us to all kinds of different sports as we were younger. And it would kind of be quite challenging, and it would get to a point where she'd be taking me to skating and then taking me home and then going and collecting Paul from football training. So it was a bit of a crazy situation where my mum was always in the car driving one of us to some sporting activity. But yeah, I think it started from my mum and just really allowing us as many opportunities into sport and really not pushing us in any way, shape or form, but just giving us every opportunity possible. I think that's really key. My mum's very laid back. She's not one of these that would know this or know that about support. She was really just there to support us along the way and give us every opportunity.
Wow, opportunity is the word, isn't it? Like that's it's so important, I think, for young kids to have that. That's amazing. Was she an athlete herself?
No, she wasn't. She wasn't. So I think she always loved sport, and I think that's why she probably, I guess, wanted to give us every opportunity. And yeah, I think she's obviously absolutely loved following and supporting both myself and Paul on our individual dreams in sport.
So where did the Olympic obsession come from then? Like, what was it that sparked that for you?
It's something I can't really remember. To be honest with you, like I said, I remember always thinking it, and I've had it written down here and there, but I can't remember what started that Olympic obsession. I guess even though it was the Summer Games, London 2012, I guess just the whole Olympic spirit, the Olympic environment. There's a lot of crossover between that, the summer and the winter games. So I guess that's probably started it. And then the main winter games that I watched would have been Sochi in 2014, and I think that's when that just further pushed me to keep pursuing that dream.
Well, how old would you have been during London 2012?
London 2012, I would have been probably 11.
Okay. I mean, it's great. That's the whole concept of what London 2012 was all about, right? It was the quote was inspire a generation. And I watched it, certainly inspired by it, and clearly yourself as well.
And we've had other guests on this we've spoken to, like London 2012. It keeps coming back to that, and it's like that's been a bit of an eye opener for me of like actually how important that is,
Oh, massive. And I think especially there was so much hype around a lot of Yorkshire athletes, especially Jessica Ennis-Hill. So yeah, lots of athletes like that really, I guess, inspired the younger generation like myself, seeing it constantly on TV for a few weeks. And yeah, like I said, having so many Yorkshire athletes win so many medals as well, I guess, sort of just creates that atmosphere even more.
So then, sort of going back to your then career a bit more. Obviously, initially you were a men's individual solo skater. You weren't originally doing pairs, and like that was how you imagined your pathway to be. So am I right in thinking you obviously had some success as a junior? You became junior national champion a couple of times.
Yeah.
So then, when obviously you still had the Olympic dream, but you've got success as a junior, and then you decided to go to Switzerland to train.
Yeah.
What was that decision about? Why was that important? So,
like I said, through the junior career, I was progressing quite nicely. And what one key thing was attending the European Youth Olympic Games in 2017. That was the most incredible, exciting and nervous, not knowing what it's going to be like moment ever. And even now looking back, such fond memories, and to have that experience at a young age was absolutely incredible, and probably gave me even more fire to continue on to, I guess, the main Olympics. But yeah, so was successful in that point, and then really it got to a point where I just wasn't quite progressing as much, and at the point I was starting to move into the senior category. So I was looking for a new coaching team, a new training base. In Switzerland, I'd been out a few times for camps before. Absolutely loved it. So at that point, I was just so focused, and that's all I wanted was that. All I wanted was that move to Switzerland, to go into that training, to train alongside some of the best skaters in the world, and to have really that true, I guess, world-class coaching as well.
And I mean, what that must have felt quite a big step for you at the time, presumably.
I think I look back and I was 17 at the time and probably a little bit nonchalant and a bit laid back, but it didn't actually feel that big to me. In a weird way. It was sort of like, well, I'm moving countries. All I want to do is skate. All I want to do is get to the Olympics. So in my mind, that was the priority. So I think maybe a lot of the sacrifices, leaving family, friends, home life, I guess, was always overridden by the excitement of the opportunity. So looking back, I never really felt awfully homesick in a way, because I was just so excited by the project and the opportunity to be there.
I totally get that, like the whole, it's just another stepping stone kind of vibe, like, and it's just what you got to do, and it doesn't feel like anything big because it's just the logical next thing in the journey that you clearly have, the vision that you have of the future, and you kind of just get on with it. And from the outside, it might look huge, but from the inside, it's obviously not that big a thing. But like, I mean, technically, it'd be good to know a little bit more about skating in general. Like you said that you weren't kind of progressing as much as you wanted to progress. I watched the men's final. I don't know what the technical term is for it.
Yeah.
The one with Ilya Malinin and all those.
Yeah.
All those. And obviously, what they're doing looks phenomenal. I have no idea the way it's judged, and no idea what what's being looked for, and because all the routines look very similar, and I'm sure it's the same way that people watch diving. But what was it like specifically that was kind of holding you back from making that progression at the time to where you wanted to be versus where you were?
So at that time, it was more the technical jumps actually, so the top guys in the world, that you would have seen a lot of the Olympics, a lot of them will all be doing quadruple jumps, so 4 rotations in the end, in the air. At that point, when I was 13, 14, I was very relatively on level with the rest of the world in terms of getting my triple jumps, and was progressing nicely. But within the sport, you've got combination jumps, so that's one jump after the other. So it might be a jump that's 3 rotations followed by another jump that was 3 rotations. That was one of the jumps that I was struggling with. And also another element that's 3.5 rotations called the triple Axel. That was another element at that moment and at that age that I needed to start conquering in order to basically keep up with the rest of the world. So they were the 2 main technical jumps that I was struggling with. And I just felt at the time that didn't feel like it was going to materialize where I was at my current training base.
Like, I guess specifically as well, like, what is it about those jumps that you were struggling with? Because again, making the connection to diving, we have twists, we have somersaults, and there's divers that are limited on certain skills that they can and can't do for many reasons. I was limited on skills I couldn't do just because of my physicality. I was too tall. I couldn't spin fast enough in the air, but I could try and like minimize that disadvantage by pushing the board harder and trying to jump higher.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, because I was surrounded by a lot of people that were pushing these hard dives, I was pushing myself really hard and found a way to figure it out. What was it for you, I guess, in maybe, I don't know,
Yeah, it was
didn't allow you to do that, and how did you deal with that?
With that, one of the main things on the triple, it was I had no problem doing those jumps in solo. It was putting them together that was the difficulty, and probably it was mainly just technique, really. My technique at the time didn't necessarily lend myself to do the combination jumps easily. And some techniques you see around the world, some people find combination jumps really easy, whereas others struggle really. And I was one of them. And then on the triple axel, one of the things I was struggling with was really just staying in the air, and at least trying to start to make a little bit more rotation close to that 3.5. So that was, I guess, the two more specific issues I was struggling with on those technical elements. And really, it wasn't, I guess, necessarily anything I was missing physically. It was probably more technique based, which was what I was looking for.
Just quickly on the spins, obviously in diving with the somersaults, a lot of people like spot, so they get little like flashes of, pool, like water. But with twisting, no one sees anything. It's purely feel, and then because then you bend your body afterwards, like the pike shape then stops the twist. So like you're twisting, and then like you close it in a pike, and it like makes you go forward.
Feel with a little bit of fear sprinkled in as well.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, when I watch skaters, obviously the how fast you're twisting is pretty crazy. Are you spotting? Is it pure feel? What's that process like?
I mean, I don't think you have time to spot. You're rotating that quick in the jumps. You don't have time to spot. I think all the jumps in under a second. So yeah, it's that quick. It's all based on feeling. No spotting on the jumping elements.
That makes a lot of sense. But then what I find strange, I suppose we still feel in diving, but then like I said, there's the check moment that kind of closes the whole thing. I mean, you don't really have that in skating. You just hit the ice with a blade, hopefully, right?
Yeah, but you probably don't see it, but that checking process does happen, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So as you're slowly making it round, say you've got maybe between half rotation and quarter rotation left, you'll start to lift your arms, lift one of your legs to almost anticipate hitting the ice. But it's something you only really see in slow motion, whereas if you watch it at normal speed, you just think, they're rotating, and then all of a sudden they hit the ice and somehow they're in a nice landing position with no issues.
Yeah, honestly, it's insane. Because the annoying thing is like they all make it look super easy, but then when I go ice skating, I try and just do like a little jump, and it's terrifying. And never mind, was doing a few rotations and landing backwards on one skate. But I guess continue this education, because I feel like I'm learning quite a lot. And this is a question that I had whilst I was watching the games: is obviously when a skill is done, an element is done, it's like a little color coding system, right? If it's green, it's like clearly good. If it's amber, it needs to be reviewed a little bit more. And if it's there's like another color,
red.
Was it white or red? That's red. That's just like they've obviously failed that particular skill. What are the judges looking for? Are they taking form into account? Is it simply on the completion of the rotation versus what's planned? Do you have to input your skills beforehand?
Yeah, so with those boxes, there's two types, I guess, inverted commas, of judges in a way. So you got the judging panel where there's 9 judges, and they're not looking at the technical aspects. They're looking, like you say, how cleanly was the element done? Have they stepped out? Have they fallen? Have they had a little wobble? Things like that. So they're looking at those aspects on the elements like the jumps, like the spins. They're also judging the program as a whole. So more the artistic side, I guess the things in between the big jumps and the big spins like that. And then you've got the technical panel, and their job is looking at the element. So they'll look at the jump and they'll review it if they think it's under rotated. So if they're doing a quadruple jump and they're coming down and you can see they're coming down maybe a quarter early, then that's something they'll review and make a decision on. So that's what creates those yellow boxes. The green boxes does mean good. So that will, what you'll see is a nice clean landing with nice flow coming out the jump. And then those red boxes, that's when you get hit negatively. That's like your falls, your step outs, your little wobbles, you might hit the toes, a little bit of scratchiness. So I think there's, just even explaining it there, there's so many variations within every element in terms of good and bad at that. I think that's why sometimes it's quite difficult to understand for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. But to be fair, the commentators do a fantastic job of helping us understand it. I feel like I'm well educated. Freddie, how do you have any more educational based questions?
Well, I suppose then it would be then on pairs specifically. So like if you've gone for a lift and you get an amber, like what? But maybe in a place where to the audience, like the lift, like it looked like a lift happened,
no
they came
problem.
back down. Yeah.
So this is when we get even more technical. So with, for example, in the lifts,
Brilliant.
there's different levels that you can achieve. So the higher the level, the more marks you get. So you go from base, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Everyone at the Olympics is pretty much fairly comfortable with level 4. So what would have happened if I got an amber box on a lift? It could be you've not done the required amount of rotations on one arm to get that level, if that makes sense. So it might have just changed a little bit later, if that makes sense. So you're in the lift, you've gone up and then you change position. That might have happened a bit later. So that's where they might review it and they might drop you down a level. So things like that, that's when it gets quite technical and complex.
Yeah, to the untrained eye, it must be. It's the same with diving, you know.
Even to the trained eye, it can be hard.
Well, I was going to say, like, you say untrained eye, but I feel like all the spectators that were in the arena during the Winter Olympics seemed very knowledgeable about what was actually happening. The way that they were kind of reacting, it was very much in line with the kind of colours that were coming up in ice, even though they didn't get exactly the same information in the arena. Whereas you compare it to diving, I remember a funny situation from the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham where Jack Law completely failed his dive. He did the wrong dive, but he did a really good dive, even though it was the wrong dive that he was supposed to do. And afterwards, everyone was like applauding, like, come on, Jack, whatever, like, did a great dive. But then it was a failed dive, so then they started booing the judges.
Oh.
Even though he actually just done the wrong dive. But it seems like all the spectators actually were quite knowledgeable in the arena. But have you ever had that before, where you kind of, you know, you've done something, you know, you haven't quite achieved it, but the response from the crowd is totally incorrect?
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, fairly often. Because I think probably like yourselves in diving, you're your own harshest critic. So even when something looks absolutely perfect, you might have felt like it wasn't your best. And things that probably similar to diving, I guess I'll give you an example is, for example, when we do the throw jump, so when I throw my partner, she's going for 3 rotations, but occasionally it might just happen where it pops, so she might end up doing a double. The problem is a lot of the audience sometimes can't see the difference in that moment between a double and triple, so I guess that's an example where you might get a little bit more applause for something that I guess for yourselves wasn't the right thing.
Super interesting. Well, I'm feeling significantly more educated on skating, which is good. I'd like to bring it back to you and some of your experiences, and I want to kind of jump into the injuries aspect, which obviously was the reason why you had to switch your focus from being a single skater to a pair skater. So, um, firstly, kind of speak around your experience of your injuries, and also, this whole Olympic dream was individual first of all, I guess, to start, but then
Yeah.
it changed to having to rely on someone else. How did that
Yeah.
affect you?
Um, so I guess I'll start with the injuries. It happened when I was still in Switzerland. I just won, I think, second national junior title in Sheffield, and I'd flown back to Switzerland, and it was one of these sessions where I didn't have to do it. I'd just flown back, and I think it might have been the day after. It was, you can do it if you want, but it's not a requirement. You can also take the rest day. And me being me, I thought, yes, I want to do it. Just coming off winning nationals, you get that little bit of extra energy. You're preparing for the Junior World Championships in a few months. So I guess that extra motivation. And I was on the ice, and it was actually while I was practicing the triple axel. And it was actually slightly better than normal. So I'd rotated slightly more, but I'd come down on my right leg with my left crossed over, slightly under. And what had happened is, I guess you can say my blade kind of got stuck. And then that's when my knee kind of twisted. And I could almost hear and feel kind of like an awful crunching sound in my knee, which wasn't ideal. But with not really having any major injuries, initially I didn't think too much of it. And then I continued that session, tried to do another one or two jumps, and then my knee just basically just started to give way. And then that's when the panic starts in. And then that night it just swelled, to the point where you now think it's really quite bad. And then next thing was on crutches through an airport back to Sheffield, to get scanned to see that I'd torn my cartilage in my knee, torn my meniscus in my knee. And yeah, thinking back to that point, I guess it didn't feel like the end of the world. And I think because it was my first major knee injury, you sort of have that motivation of, well, we're going to come back stronger. So I had it operated on at the end of December, and then started my rehab with my knee early in January. Part of the surgery was to have my meniscus sutured back together, which you'll probably hear now in hindsight probably wasn't the best decision. But with the impact of all the jumping to try and preserve as much cartilage, especially being relatively young at the time, was one of the key things to do. Fast forward, was rehabbing, no real issues. Got back on the ice and I was starting to jump again. Not doing anything silly or anything earlier than I needed to do. Back in Switzerland, starting again, and I went for one of the jumps. It's called a double loop, a relatively easy jump. Never had any issues. And as soon as I took off, you take off on your right leg pretty much mostly by itself. As soon as I took off, I heard that crunching and almost popping sound straight away. And yeah, immediately it just felt absolutely awful. Could barely put weight on it. And then that's when the panic really, really sets in, because you're thinking, oh God, I've just gone and done it again. Where do I even go from here? And it was much worse initially after doing that second time, because I'd not fully rehabbed from the first time. So yeah, same thing, flying back home. scan. What had happened was I'd torn my cartilage again, same place, the suturings come out, and basically everything had gone a little bit here, there, and everywhere. So that was that. And then, yeah, started that rehab process, and it was much tougher. After not fully recovering from the first one, it was really tough getting back. And at that point, I think I was coming to the realization within myself, and I knew I probably wasn't ever going to be able to skate the solos again, just because it felt like you've lost all this time, your knee isn't massively stable, and are you really going to be able to push to the limit that you have to get these new elements? So at that point, that's when I guess I almost had to think about other opportunities.
And then that's so wild to me, because obviously, yes, it's like still skating, but I mean, I know from my experience, like working on ships, just how different it is going from being, you know, an individual skater to pairs, and particularly for you as well, you know, you're no longer doing any jumps. Well, maybe some, right? But
not
mostly
to the same level. Yeah, relatively easier jumps. Yeah.
But then you're suddenly this then base for another person, and you need all that upper body strength and all this, like, you know, mad kind of
completely
gymnastics almost. Yeah. So like, how? Well, okay. I mean, I suppose I've got a lot of questions here, really, but
yeah.
How did you know? First of all, you and Anna. How did that come about? Like, what were those first few stages like?
So it came about, I guess, more through chance of being in a similar scenario, actually. She'd also had knee surgery. She'd had a few issues with knees, and probably was of the same mindset, where it was a different opportunity for her. At the time, she'd gone out and was training in Canada with a different partner. So at that point, I didn't really think that was too much of an option to skate with Anna, and was looking at other opportunities at the time. But equally, I was looking for an opportunity I knew, I guess, I felt would work. I'm I think most athletes are very all or nothing. If it's an opportunity I truly believe in and think we can get to the Olympics, and I'll do it. But if it's something that I don't think we would, then I wouldn't bother starting, basically. So that was that. But then that didn't quite work out for her. So she came back to the UK, and I guess was in a similar position where she was looking for a partner. I was looking for a partner. Skating is quite a small world, probably like diving. So I've known her since we were 13, 14, competing alongside each other for our solos career. So yeah, it was sort of through her coach, who I knew at the time, sort of quite just reached out and said, would you be willing to give it a go? And at that point, I immediately said yes, because I knew it would probably work, actually. So that was in December 2019. At the time, I was still really struggling with my knee, not really doing too well with that. But that opportunity, I guess, sort of ignited a lot of motivation towards everything again. And I flew straight up to Scotland to, I guess, have that initial tryout and that initial first time on the ice. And we laugh about it now, looking back at the first videos. She's near enough dragging me round because my knee was that bad I could barely even do some of the basic skating. But yeah, so that's sort of how I guess our partnership started, was in a similar position, and she had as much motivation to the Olympic dream, I guess, as I did.
I mean, that's amazing that you both came from knee injuries as well, and like there's an element of, I mean, it's cliche to say, but there's an element of sort of destiny there, really, isn't there?
Yeah. It did feel like that in a way, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. And then for you, just personally, how long did it take until you were feeling comfortable in pairs, like as a base, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is going well now?
It was tough. I think it was tough at the start because all the skills are completely new, and just even the thought of being responsible for lifting someone above your head while turning on the ice, and throwing them here, there, and everywhere. I guess there comes a lot of responsibility that you feel within that. And the first, we didn't compete for the first, I guess, year, mainly due to COVID, but also that was quite a good opportunity for us to learn, I guess, the basics and learn the skills. But those first year was really, really tough. It almost felt like things were progressing really slowly. But I think at that time, because it was new, you have so much motivation, and we were doing everything we can. We were putting the hours in on the ice, but also at the start putting a lot of hours off the ice. So a lot of the lifts, I guess, start off the ice before they getting transferred onto the ice. So yeah, it was difficult at the start. I'd say it probably took about a good 18 months until we started competing, where I started to feel a little bit more confident within that.
Beyond the physical aspects as well, obviously there's as you say, there's a lot of trust that she has to put in you to lift her up above your head. Um, I guess because there was you knew each other for a long period of time, you at least knew what the other was like. But did you have to like work hard together to kind of just align with one another personality wise? How did you help one another kind of grow with this goal of making it to the Olympics?
I think initially, because we did already know each other, and we already were friends, we knew that we would get along. And I think the basics and the foundations, I guess, mentally and physically were there. And I think especially mentally, in terms of we both had the same amount of motivation and would do anything it required to progress with our Olympic dreams. So I think that was such a strong foundation, and was such a key one. There was never any days, don't get me wrong, like all athletes, there's days you come in and you don't quite feel it, but there was never a day where 110% was never not put in on the ice, off the ice. So I think that foundation was the biggest one for me, and I think that gave such a perfect alignment where it sort of allowed everything on top of that to build. And the trust was, we never really had to work on it. It just happened naturally as we got more comfortable, more confident in the lifts. We were able to feel that trust, if that makes sense. So it wasn't necessarily something we had to feel like we worked on. It just happened quite naturally.
No, that's amazing. And I mean, again, from my experience of watching ice shows, it's the individual skaters are the ones who seem to be who fall more often. You know, it's on the twist jumps.
Yeah.
But obviously, very occasionally you see falls from pairs, and like that really scares me. I mean, did you ever, does that happen in competition? And yeah,
it unfortunately does. Thankfully, touch wood, we've not had tons, but there's been a few in practice, especially when you're starting. Yeah, that's tough because it's your worst nightmare and more. I'm sure it's probably 10 times more for her because she's about 8 foot in the air. So yeah, when that happens, and it has happened, it was tough. But I guess we never lost that trust in each other. It's more just about building the confidence again. So it's never a moment when those awful situations happen. And there was one situation at competition, not in the competition, but on the practice, which I'm sure I'll probably get in a little bit later. But it just knocks your confidence a lot. But I never felt it really affected our trust in each other. I think we're both very resilient. And I think that determination to continue always kept that trust.
There's always going to be speed bumps, especially when you're chasing something so high. You know, the Olympics is no joke. It's not for everyone. Not everyone's cut out for it. And you have to have that resilience, and it's just the knowledge that you can overcome those speed bumps is very important. And when you're doing with a partner, the fact that it's almost like unwritten or unspoken, that you just know that, okay, it's fine, that happens, you move on. That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think we knew each other inside out, and especially in the last couple of seasons, we really just had that telepathic nature where we didn't really have to say much, but you could just tell what the other one was feeling and thinking. And I guess we managed to build that almost as one, that complete unity on the ice.
Yeah, it's amazing. Jumping forward a little bit to your Olympic qualification now, obviously it must have been an incredible moment. I don't know how it works. Obviously, you spoke about the quota spot, and I know that it's qualifying the country, the spot. It doesn't necessarily mean it's your spot. Did you have to go and qualify afterwards as well, like nationally?
Nationally, we were always really, for the Olympics, we were the only ones that could be selected at that point, and we built up, I guess,
Okay.
we'd won 5 nationals in a row, so that was never, not in an arrogant way, but that was never really the problem. It was more the rest of the world that was always what we were having to compete against. So the way qualifying works is so for example, in our pairs discipline, there was 16 spots available at the World Championships in 2025 in Boston. And then there's a second, much smaller qualification 6 months later where there's 3 spots available. So when you build it up, that's really your main opportunity you've got. And I think that season, we were having a really, really good season. Something was just changed positively at the start of the season. Everything started to click. And we built up so much confidence through that competition before we finished 5th at the Europeans, which was totally unexpected and far beyond, I guess, what we'd ever hoped for. So going into that World Championships, preparation, I guess, couldn't have been any better. But in reality, it doesn't matter. It's about what you do in that moment. And Boston 2025 was always like the benchmark from when we started pairs, because if Boston 2025 doesn't go well and we don't get, I guess, that spot, then yeah, you've got the other qualifying, but in reality it's much tougher. It almost felt like the Olympics wasn't going to happen. So it felt like that was the biggest step, the biggest hurdle to us getting to the Olympics.
And then obviously just thinking about that moment when you qualified, so then you basically know you're going. And I remember, like, one of the highlights of my career is back in 2016 on poolside at the World Cup. And it's very similar, the qualification event for the Olympics. If you make the semi-final, you've qualified a quota spot for your country. And I'm literally stood next to this man right here, Yona. We're stood next to each other on poolside, and the scoreboard comes up, and we're both in the semi-final. So we both know that we've qualified for our first ever Olympic Games. Just absolutely wild. And I remember that so well. But the difference was, Yona knew he was going at this stage as, representing Jamaica, the only sort of real choice in that moment. Whereas obviously for me, it wasn't the case. So it was still one of my most amazing experiences ever, but I didn't know that I'd be going. So, but then I think for you, I can just imagine getting that quota spot like Yona, but then this is it, right? That must have been a crazy feeling.
I think it was. But I always never, even right up until the Olympic Games, probably until I stepped onto that Olympic ice, I never wanted to almost let my mind feel like it was happening, because I always thought, you know, you could get injured, you could have this could go wrong, that could go wrong. I just felt in that moment it was a massive achievement and felt like another big step towards the destination I wanted, but didn't necessarily feel, I guess, like that was it, if that made sense. So I think I've always been one of these people where I never get too high and I never get too low. I'm always sort of steady. So when it's a disastrous competition, I can take it on the chin. And when it's our best ever, I'm also sort of fairly level. So I guess at that point, didn't feel like a massive celebration, just felt a satisfaction of, yes, that's the biggest step in our way. And now we can start to plan and look forward for what's to come.
It should be the exact same as you. Like, I never get too high, never get too low. It's always like try and stay flat.
I'm the opposite.
But I remember in my head leading up to that World Cup and leading up to the qualification event, imagining kind of like both sides of this of the outcome. And sometimes I'd see in my own head, like, I do my last dive, I get out of the water, I see the scoreboard come up, I know I've made it. I'm literally doing like a lap of the pool in celebration. Obviously, that's not what I did. Because in that moment, it was like so much more overwhelming. It hit so hard. Because it was like, wow, this whole journey, I ticked it. It was an amazingly emotional moment. But then the 6 months after that, up until the games, like you say, like there's so many things that can happen. That 6 months was like the weirdest kind of, so happy and so excited, but also so scared at the same time, because I didn't want anything to then affect my chances.
I think what I did at that championships, and probably what I still did on Olympic ice, was I almost had to disassociate the fact that it was Olympic qualification and that it was the biggest moment of my life. And if this goes wrong, then I may never forget this. So I almost had to disassociate that and almost treat it as another competition and almost treat it as just a focus on the job at hand. And I remember going out to skate the free program, which is the final one that pretty much decides it. And I remember stepping onto the ice, and I still remember it now. I just remember being happy and excited and just felt so ready to perform and not necessarily feeling that awful pressure of don't mess up because this is your Olympic shot. So I think that's probably helped to why it, for me anyway, really helped when I was able to do that at events.
That's amazing. If you could, this might not be possible, but do you think you'd be able to summarize? Do you think it's purely just your character, or like if you could summarize what got you to that perfect level of like performance readiness, not being too excited, if you could summarize that for like someone to try and, take your advice.
I think for me, I always took a lot of confidence from training. So I always felt like if training had gone well, previous competitions had well, and I had that deep down confidence, I think that always led me to a point where when I was turning up to that next competition, there wasn't as much anxiety or worry over, well, this hasn't been going well, this hasn't been well. It's almost like, no, everything's been going well. I'm well prepared, and I just felt I've just got to go and show it, but not in a way where I was worried, just more of I feel ready to do this.
Then once you get to that to the Olympics, and I presume you're taking the exact same mental approach, you got yourself into that same position and everything. Were you able to enjoy it at all, or what was the vibe? What was the most valuable aspect of Milan for you?
So, well, the build-up wasn't so ideal. So we just had home Europeans in Sheffield in January, which had gone well, really happy. That was the most amazing experience, skating on home ice. But upon returning to training, I started to have some wrist issues, which weren't getting better. So we weren't able to train any lifts, any twisting, anything that really put any pressure through my wrist. That got worse. Had a scan, and I think I'd had some underlying tears but also I'd had quite a few cysts, and I think one of the cysts had basically just flared up. It was the worst pain ever. I remember doing one of the lifts, and I literally felt physically sick afterwards. I was in that much pain. So I had to rest a lot. Had a steroid injection, which was starting to work. And then the last session before leaving for the Olympic Games, after having 2 weeks of up and down and almost just feeling like your world's turned upside down, last session before I leave, it flares up again. And at that moment, I don't even know what I was thinking, just every kind of emotion. And the rink had nicely done like a nice send-off. So it was like a happy moment, but then deep down, you're like, just that pure panic because my wrist is not in a good place. I know it's going to take at least a few days to even get back to an okay stage. We're turning up to the Olympics having not really ran any of our programs, not gone through any of our programs in full, not really done half the elements we needed. So I guess turning up initially at that Olympic Games, you just like almost that fear that it's not going to be what you hoped, and you think, why is this happening at the worst possible time? And that awful feeling where I just felt like I don't want to spend my whole Olympic experience in pain. So I guess that was the difficult starting point. But we got great medical care out there and gradually phased in a return. And I was lucky. We had our individual event, and we also had a team event. So the team event was before the individual event. And it was basically quite touch and go for that. And we did make it for the team event. And yeah, stepping on that Olympic ice, even in the training before skating over the Olympic rings, is really special. But yeah, in that moment, I think for the team event, I just felt so happy and grateful that I was even in a shape where I could go out and actually skate to the best of our ability. The team event didn't go totally to plan. We had a fall on one of the throws, and overall was a little bit shaky, which I guess is probably understandable with the build-up. But I think in that moment, I wasn't too distraught. It was more like, okay, it wasn't the best. It's not the end of the world. We've still got our individual event to come. Can I have that week in between to really build? And that's what it was about, almost going back to not to square one, but reflecting, what have we learned? Can we get a good solid week's training in? Which we did. And then that brings us to probably the best moment ever, really, for me in terms of a skate perspective. For our short program, the qualification is top 16. That was the main goal. And then we were ranked quite well, so we were sort of towards the middle of the comp, towards the end. And normally I don't like to know what's going on, but because there's TVs everywhere in the change room, the warm-up area, you just happen to see it. So I could see what was going on, and everyone was skating really well. So the qualification score before we stepped onto the ice was 64 points. And I think before that, we'd got over that once before. So stepping onto that Olympic ice, I knew that this would have to be our best ever skate if we've got a hope that we'll qualify. And it was. We did lay down our best ever skate on Olympic ice. And just that feeling when you finish, just almost that pure excitement and almost disbelief that you've actually skated your best on Olympic ice. There's nothing more I guess you can hope for as an athlete other than to skate your best. And then into the kiss and cry area where you get your scores, and then we see that we scored 66, a massive score for us, and to see that we'd qualified, yeah, those feelings are the best ever. And I think that almost felt like completed, I guess. Overall, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to beat those feelings ever again.
Wow. I mean, that was beautiful. I loved I love listening to that. And you're
I think
right.
it's
Like,
also really cool that you got to share that with someone as well in that moment.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's
And
what
I
we
mean,
both dreamed of, really, and to do that, like I said, it's that just almost just disbelief that you'd done it.
yeah, 100%. I mean, to be honest, I was going to ask you as well. It's like my kind of final question for this main section. Like, so, like, you know, what was a highlight from that whole experience? But you've kind of answered that already. So, and I love to hear that happened in the hardest moment. I suppose then, like, yeah, for me then, obviously you did the Olympics, and for the short course, is that what you call it? Sorry,
Short program.
Short program. There you go.
Close.
It's close.
Close.
You've done the performance of your life, and you've probably had the experience of your life, and then you have more events, and like we said, you go to Prague, you do the World Championships, and you know now at this stage is going to be your last event. And I think you said it earlier in the beginning that you're, you know, really very grateful to your mum for her support in all of this, and I think she got to watch you in what you knew was going to be your final ever performance. Could you just maybe summarize how that felt?
Well, yeah, it's quite emotional because, you know, there's been many people along the way that have supported me throughout my journey, coaches, lots of people, support staff, my fiance, but my mom has been there from the start. She'd been there from my first steps on the ice, and at times when I had additional injuries before Prague, where I thought Prague might not happen, I think that extra motivation to do it for her and almost have that closure and that completion where I can take those final steps off competitive ice in front of her and almost just bring the most beautiful close, I guess, to my competitive story. That 18 years she's been with me every step of the way. So that was, yeah, really important for me to have that, I guess, moment with her in Prague.
I really resonate with that because I was able to have my mum and a few family and friends as well. And my last ever competition in Paris, and what you say there is a beautiful way to just kind of like wrap the career, especially for someone that supported you throughout your entire career, the same way that my mum supported me from the very start. And it was really cool to be able to show her in that moment, like, you know, all the effort, all the sacrifice, all the spending, everything was absolutely, you know, well worth it.
A long list.
It's really phenomenal. Yeah, honestly. Yeah, could go on and on and on in terms of like, what it's actually taken to get that. And it would be a lovely way to close out this episode, but it's not quite how life works, because retirement from sport is only the first retirement in life, and there's a what next and there's a what now. And, you know, for you in that moment, based on what you said at the very start of this podcast, it was somewhat unexpected-ish that it came at that particular moment in time. You've obviously had a bit of time now to think about what's kind of coming up. Do you feel prepared for this period? And has the transition been okay so far? And what are some of the lessons that you've taken from your career that you can apply into the future?
Yeah, I think I'm massively prepared for it, because I think I knew this would always probably be the end for me competitively at this moment in my life. So over the last couple of years, I've almost been planning for that. So a few personal things. I'm getting married in June, which I'm really excited for. And also over the last 5-6 years, thank you, I've been long distance from my fiance while I've been training in Dundee. So that's been super difficult. So I've almost got this overjoy feeling right now just to be home and be able to spend a lot more time with her, and also around my other family, my mom, couple of sisters and a couple of nephews as well. So I guess as much as I've left a large part of my life in Scotland, I feel like equally I've gained so much. So I think that's why the transition for me has been really quite easy, to be honest. And I think overall, because I've had that closure on my competitive career. I feel more than satisfied. I've achieved more than I ever thought I would. Had the most incredible moments at the Olympics, had the best Olympic experience that I couldn't write better than myself. I feel because I did have all that closure, I feel it's been relatively easy to walk away from, I guess, that chapter in my life. And right now I'm embracing the change and got, new plans, new aspirations in I guess, another part of life.
So what should we expect from Luke Digby then in the future?
Well, a few different things. I'm sort of taking my time just to have a rest, really, because the last 6 years, I guess, have been so intense. You feel on that hamster wheel. So now it's nice just to have a little bit of moment and, like I said, plan for more personal things, like the wedding in the summer, and then moving into the end of the year and the start of next year. A new project, still on the ice, but probably more not competitive, but will still be on the ice in a way.
Well, exciting. Slightly secretive, but I love it.
Yeah, can't tell too much now. Gotta get everything planned. But towards the end of the year, well, hopefully over the next few months, it will be quite obvious what I'm moving into. But not away from the ice. So still with the ice, but just in a different format, which I'm excited for.
Very cool. We have to do a follow-up at some point and kind of find out how that process has gone as well, because I think that's a really important aspect of what we're trying to do with our podcast and the conversations that we're having. It's really interesting to kind of like meet you at this intersection between the two and kind of like getting it going. So I mean, I can only wish you all the best with what you've got coming up. But before we do wrap up this main section, the final question that I've got to ask is for the title of this episode. So if your career to this point was a movie, what would the title be?
Probably a bit cringy, but it would have to be Chasing the Olympic Dream, because I think that's through everything, through my career, the ups and the downs, the roller coaster that it's been, that is something that's always been there, something I've constantly chased my whole entire career. And I guess I can say now I achieved that. So I guess that was the light at the end of the tunnel, the top of the mountain for me.
I think it's a great title. That's it. It's you followed that dream all the way through, man. That's wonderful. We'll lock that in. Luke, I wanna at the end of this main section now, I wanna thank you very much for joining us and sharing everything. It was great to hear more about your story, and it's just, again, I think so many things that so many athletes can relate to, like just the injuries and the huge pivots you had to take, and the moving of locations to find like the optimum training environment, and the support from all kinds of people around you, laying everything on the line for that Olympic dream, and you made it happen, and just that's wonderful. So I really enjoyed chatting with you today. So thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Been my pleasure to share my story.
No, thank you, man. And that is where we will wrap up this main episode then of Dad Beyond Sport. We'll thank Luke Digby for joining us. But Luke is going to stay around for one more dive. That's our bonus section. So if you're not there yet, the link is in the show notes. But otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.